Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., a 32-year-old night watchman named Julian walked home while the rest of his city was waking up. As he watched light bulbs flicker to life behind the windows of suburban homes and smelled the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, his brain wasn't just processing the sting of financial poverty, it was calculating something far more insidious. Julian was trapped in a chronic neurological state known as learned helplessness. Coined by psychologist Martin Seligman in the late 20th century, learned helplessness is a cognitive prison. It occurs when an individual faces prolonged, repetitive, and seemingly inescapable stress. Eventually, the brain alters its baseline assumptions. It stops looking for an exit entirely, even when the door is left wide open. Julian was not lazy. He stood on his feet for 10-hour shifts, pacing the concrete floors of an isolated industrial warehouse. He kept watch, he remained vigilant, he performed his duties perfectly. Yet his mind had succumbed to a dangerous evolutionary survival mechanism, conforming to defeat to conserve psychological energy. His prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for executive functioning, abstract thinking, and long-term planning, had been entirely hijacked by his amygdala's chronic stress signals. When the brain is operating constantly in survival mode, it treats any expenditure of energy on future planning as an existential threat. It prioritizes the immediate present. It tells you to sleep, to numb out, and to accept your current reality because fighting back feels futile. Every day, Julian would return to a tiny, suffocating one-room apartment. The ceiling fan was permanently broken, stuck in a frozen tilt. He slept on a bare mattress on the linoleum floor. His clothes were faded, and his shoes had worn thin at the soles. But the physical decay of his environment was simply a mirror of his internal mental landscape. The most painful part of Julian's existence was the cognitive dissonance he experienced. On one hand, he desperately wanted to change. He wanted to learn a trade, to understand the mechanics of business, to build financial security so he could take care of his aging mother who lived hours away in the countryside. But every time his shift ended, a profound psychological exhaustion would wash over him. He would tell himself, "Tomorrow I will study. Tomorrow I will look for a way out." But tomorrow never came. The moment he sat down, his nervous system would demand a total shutdown. He would fall into a heavy, fractured sleep from 7 a.m. until 4 p.m., waking up in the late afternoon with a heavy fog clouding his mind. He felt like he was living backwards, a ghost haunting a world that only moved forward while he slept through it. He was working incredibly hard, but he was running on a treadmill that was firmly bolted to the floor. The catalyst for Julian's transformation did not come from an emotional outburst or a sudden wave of motivation. It arrived on a freezing Tuesday morning in November, following a devastating phone call. His mother had collapsed from exhaustion and stress, hospitalized in a small rural clinic. The helplessness Julian felt in that moment shifted from profound sadness into a sharp, focused anger. On his journey back to the city via the morning commuter bus, his eyes locked onto a passenger sitting across the aisle. The man was Arthur Vance. Vance was a retired industrial psychologist who now operated as a private organizational consultant for high-performing executives. Despite the early hour, Vance was perfectly alert, radiating a sense of calm, deliberate purpose that stood in stark contrast to Julian's shattered, disheveled frame. Gathering a rare spark of assertion, Julian leaned across the aisle and asked a simple question. "How are you so awake at this hour?" Arthur Vance did not offer Julian a financial tip or a cliché motivational slogan. Instead, he introduced him to a concept that behavioral scientists call cognitive anchoring. Vance explained that he woke up at 4:30 every morning, not out of a desire to grind, but to claim what he called the friction-free hours. When Julian explained his brutal night shift schedule and his pattern of sleeping away the daylight, Vance nodded slowly. He told Julian, "You are awake when the world sleeps, and you are asleep when the world functions. Your brain has no anchor. You are giving your most pristine, high willpower cognitive state to your employer and leaving the exhausted midnight leftovers of your biology for your own life. No wonder your mind has accepted defeat." From a neurobiological perspective, Vance was highlighting a phenomenon known as decision fatigue. Every minor choice we make throughout our waking hours, from deciding what text to reply to navigating social interactions, or enduring stress, depletes a finite cognitive battery housed within the prefrontal cortex. By the time Julian woke up at 4 p.m. after a disrupted sleep, or when he tried to force himself to study after a grueling night shift, his executive functioning battery was running on empty. Vance challenged him to fundamentally restructure his circadian rhythm. He instructed Julian to sleep immediately upon arriving home at 6:30 a.m., but to force his brain to wake up at 11:30 a.m. This would provide 5 hours of baseline sleep to survive, leaving a sacred 2-hour window before his afternoon obligations began. The hours between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. are when the rest of the world builds its illusions, Vance said, adjusting the timeline to fit Julian's specific shifts. But for you, your morning happens when you reclaim the daylight. You must find your own 2 hours where your willpower is at its peak, and you must guard them with your life. Vance handed Julian a card with a set of 3 immutable rules, stating, "If you can maintain the psychological alignment for 90 days without negotiation, your brain will change. If you quit, your mind will remain a prison of your own design." The next day, at exactly 11:30 a.m., Julian's alarm pierced the silence of his room. What happened next was a textbook display of ego depletion. Ego depletion is a psychological theory stating that willpower is a limited resource that can be completely exhausted. As Julian lay there, his mind began to generate a flood of highly rational excuses. You are too tired. Your body hurts. You can start next Monday when you are fully rested. This is the exact moment where 90% of behavioral changes fail. The human brain is evolutionarily wired for homeostasis. It detests change because change requires an expenditure of metabolic energy. To protect itself, the brain will manufacture intense feelings of discomfort, fatigue, and even physical pain to force you back into your old, predictable habits. But Julian remembered his mother's frail hand in the hospital clinic. He remembered the psychological diagnostic Vance had laid out on the bus. He forced his feet onto the cold floor. For the first 7 days, Julian's life was an absolute psychological hell. His circadian rhythm was shattered. His eyes burned as he sat in front of a borrowed laptop, watching free, dense tutorials on advanced data analysis and corporate accounting, a highly technical skill he had chosen because it required absolute logical precision. During this first week, his brain could barely comprehend the information. He would read a single line of financial theory 4 times without processing its meaning. This is what psychologists call the cognitive friction phase. When you begin learning a highly complex skill, your brain has to build entirely new neural pathways from scratch. It is the neurological equivalent of trying to cut a path through a dense, overgrown jungle with a butter knife. It feels impossible because the synaptic connections haven't been reinforced yet. However, by day 20, a profound shift occurred. Julian's brain began to manifest a process known as neuroplasticity, the literal structural remodeling of the brain's physical architecture. Because he was feeding his mind complex information at the exact moment his cognitive battery was refreshed, his brain adapted. He no longer needed to fight the alarm. His internal biological clock began to anticipate the waking hour, pulling him out of sleep at 11:28 a.m., 2 minutes before the buzzer. The tutorials began to make sense. The data points ceased to look like an alien language. They began to look like a map. His daily 30-minute post-study walks through the quiet streets became a form of active meditation, lowering his cortisol levels and allowing his brain to engage in diffuse mode thinking, the state where the mind subconsciously organizes and stores the information it just learned. By the 3rd month of his experiment, Julian had undergone a radical psychological transformation that began to ripple outward into his physical environment. This is where we observe a powerful psychosocial phenomenon known as the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect dictates that individuals perform up to the level of expectations placed upon them, but more importantly, that people internalize the subconscious cues and behavioral changes you project, shifting how they treat you. Julian had spent 2 hours every single day building an internal foundation. He had completed 3 advanced certifications in corporate bookkeeping and logistical data optimization. He had shed weight, his posture had naturally straightened, and the vacant, exhausted look in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, calculating alertness. He was no longer behaving like an invisible night watchman who was trapped by reality. He was behaving like an executive who was temporarily guarding a warehouse. One afternoon, Julian noticed a massive flaw in how the warehouse tracked its multi-million-dollar seasonal inventory. Using his newly acquired skills, he spent his sacred 2-hour morning block building a highly sophisticated, automated algorithmic spreadsheet that streamlined the entire logistical process, virtually eliminating tracking errors. He didn't complain about his salary. He didn't ask for a favor. He simply presented the data architecture to his supervisor. The supervisor was stunned. Word traveled rapidly up the corporate ladder to the regional logistics manager. On day 87 of his 90-day journey, Julian was called into the main office. He wasn't just given a slight raise. He was offered a vacant position as the lead logistical data analyst for the entire firm. A daytime role, a professional office desk, and a salary that instantly doubled his previous income. When Julian called Arthur Vance to report his success, Vance's reaction was characteristically clinical. "The job wasn't a gift, Julian," Vance told him over the phone. "The world didn't change its mind about you. You changed your neural architecture, which forced you to change your behavior, which left the world with absolutely no choice but to reevaluate your value. But remember, waking up with purpose is no longer a strategy. It is who you are now." 1 year later, Julian had successfully moved his mother out of the rural clinic and into a comfortable apartment close to the city's top medical centers. His life looked entirely unrecognizable from the bleak, blue-gray isolation of his night watchman days. Yet every single morning, long before his corporate office hours began, Julian was awake. Not because he was desperate, but because he understood that the human mind requires constant, intentional friction to avoid sliding back into the comforting decay of learned helplessness. If you are ready to break the cycle of learned helplessness, your restructuring protocol must be systematic, mechanical, and entirely non-negotiable. Here is the exact psychological protocol to initiate your own cognitive rewiring. Step 1. Eliminate environmental convenience. Tonight, set your alarm for exactly 5 a.m. Do not choose 5:15 or 5:30. Place your phone on the absolute opposite side of your room. This forces a physical behavioral activation. You must physically stand up and cross the room to cut off the stimulus, overriding the brain's initial lazy morning survival whispers. Step 2. Pre-commit to a single cognitive skill. Do not wake up at 5 a.m. and wonder what you are going to do. That causes immediate decision fatigue. Decide right now on one highly specific, high-leverage skill or project, a certification, a language, a complex technical discipline. Dedicate the first 60 minutes entirely to this solitary focus. Accept that the first 21 days will feel like cognitive friction. Your brain will resist, but you must realize that discomfort is simply the physical sensation of neuroplasticity occurring. Step 3. Protect the sleep anchor. You cannot cheat sleep biology and expect high-level cognitive functioning. To wake up pristine, you must ruthlessly cut off the evening dopamine loops, shut down the screens, end the endless scrolling, and anchor your sleep schedule. You are not sacrificing your evenings. You are buying your future. If you commit to this psychological restructuring for the next 90 days, you will not just change your habits. You will fundamentally alter your identity. You will transition from a reactive organism trying to survive its environment into a proactive architect who commands it. The dawn belongs to those who are willing to rewrite their minds. If you are ready to break the mechanics of helplessness and step into the 5 a.m. protocol, hit the like button as a psychological contract with yourself. Drop a comment below detailing exactly what skill you will build during your first friction-free hour tomorrow. Let the community hold your executive functioning accountable. Subscribe to the Psych Lens as we continue to dissect the hidden behavioral mechanics behind human transformation. Your future self is waiting on the other side of that alarm clock. Do not make them wait another day.